A few things with faith. This morning we're going to start off. We're going to get a good definition for faith. We're going to get a really good definition of what faith is. And then we're going to take a look at a couple of scriptures and find out why it's important to study faith and to increase your faith, make your faith stronger. And we're going to take a look at those things today. And then as we go forward over the next several weeks, we're going to use Hebrews chapter 11. Excuse my voice this morning. My allergies are killing me today. We're going to use Hebrews chapter 11 to explore very many Old Testament men and women that God used, right? And that they were credited with having great faith. Hebrews chapter 11 has often been called the Hall of Faith or the Hall of Fame of Faith. I just call it the Hall of Faith. That's what I'm calling this lesson, the Hall of Faith. And we're going to look at those. We're going to look at those people, and we're going to look at their faults and their strengths. We're going to look at any weaknesses that they might have had. We're going to look at why God used them, how God used them, and we're going to look at how their faith showed in everything they did, and at the fact that they were all credited with great faith. And we're going to use this as an opportunity to dive back into the Old Testament a little bit and find out some things about people that you know well. I mean, everybody knows Abraham real well. You know a bit about Noah. You know a good bit about Moses, but maybe not a whole lot about Jephthah. You know, maybe not much as Samson. And how much can you know about Abel? Not a whole lot talked about in Abel. He kind of was here and gone, right? And then Enoch, much the same way. Not a lot said about Enoch. Well, you'd be surprised how much you can find out about those people and truly what their faith meant to them. So let's start off. Let's go ahead and turn to Hebrews chapter 11. We're going to be in there quite a bit over the next several weeks. Hebrews chapter 11. But before we get into that, I want to get a good definition of faith before we get a good biblical definition of faith. Let's look at, I looked at several different definitions, and I liked some of them, and some of them I didn't, so I kept a few and discarded a few of the other ones. So faith, according to Webster's dictionary, they still have those. Webster's dictionary is complete trust, complete. I underlined complete to emphasize that. Complete trust or confidence in someone or something. I like that. That works. Trust. We're going to get into. We're going to be defining some things here this morning. We're going to define trust. We're going to define confidence. You can't do it by saying faith. It's just a little bit different, right? So complete trust. I like this one a little bit better. Strong belief in God or in the doctrines of a religion based on spiritual apprehension. Spiritual apprehension rather than proof. Now, I really like that one a lot, right? Rather than proof. I mean, you can get into apologetics, and I did for a time, and we're going to talk about that here in a little while. But proof, rather than proof, but spiritual apprehension. Let's focus on that word apprehension. I mean, we're all pretty good with spiritual, right? I mean, we're pretty good on that, on the definition of spiritual. But what about that apprehension? Well, apprehension can mean anxiety or fear, right? I mean, that's the modern definition, the modern use of that word apprehension is anxiety or or fear that something bad or unpleasant will happen. So, spiritual apprehension, in the definition that we just talked about, right, of faith, right, for that definition, spiritual apprehension can mean you have faith because of fear, right? Couldn't do that again. Spiritual apprehension could be because you have a great fear of something. Your fear of God causes you to have faith that you don't want to end up going to hell, right? So therefore, perhaps you have great faith because you don't want to go to hell. Okay, fine. But apprehension, there's an older definition of that word apprehension, to apprehend something. So for a police officer to apprehend someone would be to arrest them. But there's an older one still, right? And that means to understand completely or to grasp fully, to apprehend something. I remember using that word, well, not when I was a kid, but seeing it used in that context before. So then A spiritual apprehension then can mean, then I prefer that definition, that it means that you understand these spiritual matters or these spiritual doctrines. Therefore, you have faith. Does that make sense? Everybody kind of understand that, right? That spiritual apprehension. So some synonyms, right? Trust, belief, reliance, conviction. I like that one. Confidence, dependence. And then go back to that word trust. Because everybody right now is thinking that word trust is to have faith, right? Is to believe something and that you're confident that that thing will happen, or that you can have confidence in that person. But think of another word. Think of another definition of that word, trust. It's a legal word, right? It's a legal document, if you will. You put something into a trust. It's a legal binding document. So that's kind of an interesting definition of that as we kind of weave our way into getting a really good definition of that word faith. So a title deed. Trust is a strong belief in the character of truth, right? Or it could be a title deed. I mean, that'll become important later. All right, now let's go to Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. Possibly, probably, most likely the best definition of faith in the Bible, right? Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. Everybody there? I'm going to try to slow down a little bit. Sorry, I tend to roll. I tend to get rolling, and then before you know it, we're falling behind. Okay, now, it's an interesting way to start a sentence, isn't it? Now, faith. Now, I'll do the New King James Version, English Standard Version. Anybody? ESV, Tina? Okay, anybody have NIV? NIV? So we got some different words right there, but it's the same Greek word. And we're going to look at that one in a minute. I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of that word in just a minute, but because it's a tough one. But we'll do our best with it. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders obtained a good testimony. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So we have to start, let's break that sentence down a little bit. Y'all know I'm kind of an English nerd. So we're going to break this sentence down a little bit. If you start with that very first word, now. Depending on how you read that, right, you can say now faith, or it's kind of like the word therefore. It's a continuation of a thought from above, right? So when we have to go back up to the top of that to see why it's there, why that word now is there. So let's go up, chapter 10, verse 26. And this is kind of a tough read right here. It's kind of hard to swallow this sometimes. But for if we sin willfully, after we have received the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins, but a certain fearful expectation of judgment and fiery indignation which will devour the adversaries. Anyone who has rejected Moses' law dies without mercy on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. Of how much worse punishment do you suppose will he be thought worthy who has trampled the Son of God underfoot, counted the blood of the covenant by which he was sanctified a common thing, and insulted the Spirit of grace? For we know him who said, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. And again, the Lord will judge his people. It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. Okay, I mean, we could spend several weeks right there, but we're not going to. That's not the point of this lesson. But recall the former days in which, after you were illuminated, you endured a great struggle with sufferings, partly while you were made a spectacle both by reproaches and tribulations, and partly while you became companions of those who were so treated. For you had compassion on me in my chains, and joyfully accepted the plundering of your goods, knowing that you have a better... Now here we go. This is where we're getting to the meat of the matter. Knowing that you have a better and enduring possessions for yourselves in heaven. Therefore, do not cast away your confidence, which has great reward, for you have need of endurance, so that after you have done the will of God, you may receive the promise. Confidence, endurance, promise. And then he quotes Habakkuk here. This is Habakkuk chapter 2, specifically verses 3 and 4. But for yet a little while, and he who is coming will come and will not tarry. Now the just shall live by faith. But if anyone draws back, my soul has no pleasure in him. But we are not of those who draw back to perdition, but those who believe to the saving of the soul. And I underlined that one 4 times. Believe. So now read that. Hebrews 11, verse 1 again. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for. What do we hope for? Right? We break that down. What is our hope? Go to heaven. Salvation. Treat one another with love and dignity and respect, and to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and then love your neighbor as yourself, right? I mean, that's what we hope for. That's what our hope is. And our hope is ultimately to go to heaven, right? That's what we hope for. And that is what they're talking about just above, right? That's what they're talking about there. But what of that word substance? Tina, what does yours say? Conviction. Kelvin? Assurance? Does it say assurance? Assurance? Yeah. Sure, assurance, right? All of those things. So, interesting thing that all of those different things, the confidence, assurance, being sure of, the substance, those are all the same word, right? It's all the same Greek word, and forgive, I'm going to try it here, but wupostasis. I think that's pretty close. Wupostasis. Hupostasis is the transliteration of that word, wupostasis. As can be seen by that sentence structure, the translation of that word wupostasis is critical, right? It's critical to the understanding of this definition of faith, right? So, interestingly, it's the same word that is used if you go to Psalm, and forgive me, I'm going to turn over here to Psalm 62, I thought. Do I have that wrong? Hang on. Bear with me. Nope, Psalm 69, verse 2. Psalm 69, verse 2. Yeah, here you go. And he says, "Save me, O God, for the waters have come up to my neck. I sink in deep mire where there is no standing." Right? No standing. No wupostasis. Right? No wupostasis. So, that word has been translated as confidence. It has been translated as assurance, substance, or title deed, as in a legal document, right? The different, I have downloaded on my iPad, I have downloaded on my iPad the King James Version New Testament Greek lexicon, and I have a Greek Testament, a vocabulary of the Greek Testament by Moulton and Milligan. I have those two downloaded on there. I know, I'm a nerd, I know. But so, depending on which one of those you look at, and there are many others that if you're interested in doing that you can transliterate the Greek, and then you can find out what that word is, and then you can use it in context, and you can find out some interesting things. So the King James Greek lexicon says it's a setting, or or placing under, right? I will. Thank you for teaching last week. I appreciate it. It could be a setting, a placing under, a substructure, okay, or a foundation, right? So a foundation. So now faith is the substance. So read it that way. Okay, wait. I'm doing that differently than I wanted to do it. And then the vocabulary of Greek Testament by Moulton and Milligan says it's a legal term. Right, that substance in this case is a legal term, right? It is it's the whole, and then it goes on to explain that it's the whole body of documents, of legal documents, that proves ownership of property, right? That wupostasis, right? So think about that. Now reread that a little bit, and there's different ones, right? So now faith is the confidence. If we read that differently than the way I read it, the different translations of that word wupostasis, confidence, that's kind of the weakest translation, confidence, because there are, looking it up, there's about 60 different Greek words that are used in the Septuagint and the New Testament, right, for that word confidence that would fit better in this case. So it's kind of the weakest translation if you use that word confidence. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for. That's a little bit better. That a surety, right? A surety or a promise from God. It makes it an assurance. That's better, right? That's a little bit better. But think about it now. Think about that word, hypostasis, in that word substance. And then break that word down. Substance. Substance. I mean, it is a better still translation of that word. It gives you a foundation, right? That which lies beneath, and it is concrete, it's definite, and it holds everything up, right? So think about it this way. Now faith is the foundation of things hoped for. That sounds a little better, right? Faith is the substance, it's the foundation. And then title deed, which, I mean, as much as I didn't want this to be the best translation of that word, hypostasis, it is the title deed. So think about that a second. It is all, like I said, it pertains to all of the legal documents. It proves ownership of something, right? So think about that a second. Now, faith is the legal binding document that God has given us for all of the things that we hope for. Faith, right? Does that make sense? That kind of breaking that sentence down a little bit, does that kind of help understand it a little bit more? Because I mean, when you read that, now faith is the assurance, the confidence, the substance, and the title deed. I mean, that's pretty good when you break that down. And that gives us a pretty good definition of faith. Any comments so far? Any questions about anything? Yes, ma'am? It would. It would be very much like a covenant. Wouldn't it be like a covenant that that some people can't hear as well, but so yeah, I'm going to try to repeat. So it would be like the covenant, right? A legal binding document, okay? And a substance. If you use all of those words when you read that sentence, it kind of brings it all together. Any other comments? Anybody? Okay. We're going a lot faster than I thought we would today. We may get out early. Little recess. Now, why is faith important, right? Why is faith important? Turn right over to on the next page, Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6. We're kind of getting ahead of ourselves here because we're going to talk about this stuff next week. But if you look at Hebrews 11, verse 6, it says, "But without faith it is impossible to please Him," God. "It is impossible to please God. For he who comes to God must believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. Without faith it is impossible to please Him. For he who comes to God must believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him." So, why is faith important? Well, without faith, it is impossible to please God. You cannot please God without having faith in Him. You have to believe that He is. Very fundamental, right? Very elemental and fundamental. You have to believe that He is, okay? And then you also have to believe that He will reward those who diligently seek Him. What does that mean, to diligently seek Him? I'm sorry? There it is. Okay, there's one, right? Put Him above everything else. What else? I can't hear you. Wholeheartedly, completely, right? And, sir? Read that. Right, we live by faith, not by sight. But to diligently seek Him. I mean, you have to get into this book, right? You have to get into this book to diligently seek Him. That's well said.
Something you cannot sit here. It's not going to just accidentally come to you. You have to actively go forward to get it.
Does everybody hear that? You have to act. It's an action, right? It's not just coming in by osmosis. When the wind's not going to blow it into your ear, and there you are. You believe, you have faith. You have to it's action. You have to actively seek God, right? So that's what that's about, right? Let's go back over to verse 1 again, because this kind of goes with it. The evidence, that we didn't talk about that yet. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Again, I used to really be into apologetics. And everybody understand everybody knows what apologetics is? Did everybody understand that? There's nothing. Okay, apologetics it's kind of a study, right? It's kind of like, no, it's not kind of like a study. It is. It's a study that you're trying to prove God's existence through physical, the physical world, which is fine, and there's nothing wrong with it, right? Through like physical world, you could do it through literature, like C.S. Lewis did. He did it by literature. You can do it science, right? You can fossil dating and all kinds of different ways that people would try to prove God's existence, right? It is used as a means to try to convert people, right? Because if you can prove the existence of God, because very often if you start in the Bible and a dyed-in-the-wool atheist, I mean a real atheist, not somebody that is, just professes to be, is more like an agnostic rather than an atheist, but one that, and they will tell you, you can't prove something with something that is unprovable, right? They think that the Bible is not a God-inspired, God-written document. So it's kind of hard to go. So a lot of people, they go to apologetics for that, right? They do all kinds of ways of doing that. And one of the most interesting ones I read, and it was the last thing I did, and I got about halfway through it, and then I stopped because you go to that Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6, and it says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. And that was it was a book. It was written by a lawyer. And I'm not opposed to lawyers, you know what I mean? They come in handy every now and then, right? So I'm teasing. So, it was called The Legal Case for God. And it was written, like I said, it was written by a lawyer as if God were on trial. And I got about halfway through that, and then I went, you know what? I'm done. I'm done with apologetics. Now, C.S. Lewis is somebody that I revere, and I really enjoy his writings. And his apologetics, once he proved to himself that God is real, and he did it through literature, which is an interesting way of doing it, and then he went right back to the Bible and was done with it, right? So his apologetics was all Bible-based apologetics. And apologetics can be Bible-based as well, right? So it's interesting, but evidence, right? So that faith is all the evidence that you need to prove the unseen, all of those unseen things. And we just finished this summer a study of angels, which are by and large unseen things, right? And I'm reading a book right now called Seeing the Unseen, which is kind of scary, actually. It's kind of a scary book, actually. So, but I recommend it if you want to have nightmares. So it's very interesting, right? Sir? So it's an interesting thought, right? So yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the same thing. That was, like I said. So, I mean, if you take that comparison a little bit farther, that, taking England, just stay with that thought, right? So England, having never touched it, felt it, tasted it, put your feet on it, you trust, you have confidence that, pictures, that history books, like you said, that others have come and told you about it, right? But you still have to have faith in it. And so when we think about that, when you compare that with Jesus, right? That you've got witnesses in this book that say they saw him, right? A lot of witnesses in this book that say they saw him, but you have never touched, smelled any of your senses have never beheld Christ. It's an apt. At first, I wanted to argue with you because it is, get on a boat and go, right? Or get on an airplane and go. When does faith end, right? So when you see God, exactly right. Yeah, absolutely true. Yeah, that's well said, right? Because what's it? Faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Why? Because when you stand in front of God, your faith is rewarded. You don't have a hope in anything anymore because you see it, right? So love is all that's left, right? So that's a very good, well said.
I would think that would make my faith stronger.
What?
I would think that would make my faith stronger when I see God.
Yeah, it would make it complete, right? That your faith is rewarded. Okay, let's go with that for a second. So think about miracles for a minute, right? So when you're reading in the Gospels, and Jesus does a miracle, right? He'll do, it changes the water to wine, or heals a leper, or makes a blind man see, or a lame man walk, or whatever the case may be. No matter what that miracle is, everybody wanted to see another one. Feeding the 5,000. Hey, can you do it again? Right? Do it again. Let me see. And on and on. And it just goes on and on and on. Right? Well, what was the purpose of that miracle to begin with? To prove that he is God, right? Partly to begin drawing a crowd to him so that he could speak. All of those things, right? Those are the reasons for him. But people get caught up. Now put yourself in that position. So it's really easy. It's really easy to criticize, because at the time when they asked the apostles, when Jesus asked the apostles, who do they say I am? Rabbi, teacher, a prophet. Some say Elijah, right? But Peter, but even still, even to that point, they had seen all of those miracles. They had seen him walk on water, right? They had seen him calm a storm. They had seen him raise Lazarus from the dead and a girl from the dead, right? They had seen all of those things, and yet when he asked them, who do they say I am? Only one of them said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God, right? And that was Peter. And it's easy to criticize, to sit here and go, man, you saw all of those miracles. But put yourself in their position, right? Not knowing what we know now, not knowing what we know now, right? And again, a lot of that is faith. All of that is faith, right, in this book. But not knowing what we know now, right? It would be so easy to be confused, to be not sure.
And that there were probably skeptics,
Oh, indeed.
That's a trick. That didn't really happen.
Oh, they did. They called him, they said, the Pharisees said, he has a demon, right? The Pharisees told Jesus, said that, after a miracle, they said, oh, he has a demon. It's by the evil one that he's doing these things. And of course, Jesus then said, a house divided can't stand, right? You can't, demon wouldn't cast out a demon, right? All of those things. So yeah, they're definitely skeptics. Most of them were Pharisees, Sadducees, Sanhedrin. But there were others, that didn't believe. You saw how quickly they turned, right? And they saw all of that. It's easy to look for the miracle rather than the miracle worker. You know what I mean? Instead of seeking the miracle, seek that miracle worker. Actively, diligently seeking God, right? That's kind of what we've been talking about here this morning. And again, I went a little bit faster. Any other comments this morning? Right. Well, those are all. What do you mean? Easy to do that, right? Easy to do that. Not you. You see evidence, right? You can see what you perceive to be evidence of God in our lives. Absolutely, right? I mean, you know.
I think whenever things are going good, I'm like thinking, God's right there with me. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
When everything's going good,
Yeah.
if I go out to the washer and dryer and they're both stopped, I'm like, thank you, God.
Yeah.
Because, I can't keep up with the time. I look, it says 20 minutes, and then I go in the house and
Well,
I'd
good.
like to know which 20 minutes.
Yeah. Well, I would. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I do.
That's real simple, but in my heart, I think God's with me.
But what about when times are not going so good?
He's the first one we blame.
Do you really? I want you to read this book. This book that I have.
Going so well, I think, what am I to learn? What
There you
am I
go.
to learn from this?
That's a great attitude to have.
I have to be that way. Because, like when B died,
Mm-hmm.
like I had this incredible man in my life for the first time, and God took him.
Mm.
But I was not ever angry with God or anything like that. I understood. I was like so happy for the
So-
5 years that I had.
Yeah. But I mean, so those trials, I got you. Those trials that you're talking about, right? That those are things. I mean, if you read in James, right? And James says, "Consider it all joy when you face trials of many kinds, because the tempting the I can't remember exactly the what's tempering is what it means. The tempering of your faith produces patience and all of those things, right? And it bolsters your faith. It's hard to do when you're going through that trial. It's difficult to do. But just like you said, you have to rely on God, and that for whatever reason, whatever purpose is going to, whatever good will come from that trial in the long run is going to be that bolstering of your faith, like Charles was talking about, right? That these I don't want to diminish any. I'm not trying to diminish, but the small things that you see, right? The beauty out in the country, or a sunrise, or flying over the Rocky Mountains, at sunset, not sunrise, because no, and but it's magnificent, and you would be a hard-hearted person to say that God does not exist, right? So all of those evidences that help to bolster your faith.
You read the rest of verse 6. Because anyone who comes to him must believe.
Must believe.
So you've already believed.
Yes.
You come to him.
Yes.
What?
That he is. That all of it, right? That he is. And he created all of this. What? No. No, that's just that. No. When you come to him, and what that verse is talking about is coming to know him, right? Is seeking him, right? That's what that verse is talking about. The first thing you have to do is believe that he is. And then you have to believe all the rest of the things that he has shown us and told us in the Bible.
Well, I think what Terry was saying is that when we make it to heaven and our faith is confirmed by being in the
Yeah.
presence of God,
Yeah.
that's when faith ends.
Well, I don't know if that,
Now, I think
It is confirmed. I would rather use the word confirmed, that my faith is confirmed, right?
Yeah, but you gotta realize in heaven, there's no temptation, there's no sickness.
Right, oh, all of that.
So,
Absolutely.
do I need faith anymore? No, I am with God. I am of God, okay?
Right.
Heaven's a totally different realm than we are here on earth, okay? If it wasn't, why do we seek it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But here on earth, we never lose our faith,
That's right.
because we're not in,
Whoa. Whoa. Whoa.
I'm just talking about the general.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
We never lose our faith here on earth.
Yeah.
Because we are not in God's heavenly presence.
Cindy.
It's just like you're,
Wait.
when you land in England, and the sign says, this is England, there's no more faith, that's it, okay?
It's, yeah, your faith is then confirmed. I agree. Cindy, you had something you wanted to say a while ago?
The events of last week showed me a lot. I have prayed, I have two granddaughters that are 13 and 17. They're Austins. So, blood doesn't make you family, okay?
Mm.
You pray every night that God will do the right thing by you, and it's hard because you watch these 13 and 17-year-olds do things that are awful.
Yep.
When the judge spoke to them last Friday, and Dee Dee and Will they know how I feel, and they know where I'm coming from. The judge said these two children said things unthinkable and unheard of to be with their mother, which I call the devil.
Mm.
And he said, and this judge is a very Christian man. He said when the hair on the back of his neck stood up, he knew that he needed to put these children back with their mother as safety for Gina, Austin, Freedom, and Mary. And where I'm going with this is I've prayed a many a night for the safety of Gina, Austin, and Reagan because of the evil that I have seen. And so you need to be real careful what you pray for because God listens.
Mm-hmm.
Big time. Big time. Because I have prayed that prayer many, many times. And Gina was not supposed to be pregnant. Laramie is kind of she's our godsend baby. She had lots of problems. But she's perfect. She came on Monday.
Mm.
Phone call came from the judge on Monday that the girls had to go back to their mom and why the decision was made. And it's full circle. And if you don't tell me that God didn't have a plan way back when Gina got pregnant that this was going to happen, you'll never convince me otherwise.
So tie that into faith. Tie that whole discussion into faith.
I have lots of faith that God would happen, that things would happen for the right reason. And I cannot doubt that. I can't. Even though my heart is broke that I'm missing those two girls, I have to leave my faith in God that it was for the right reason. And I just have to keep praying that He protects them. And I have to leave it at that. And it's hard.
It is hard. It was a good discussion this morning, y'all. It was a really good class this morning, I think. And I'll wrap it all up here real quick. We've defined faith this morning. We've said that faith is the foundation, right? The substance, the foundation, and it's the title deed, that legal binding document, that covenant for everything that we hope for. We've determined why faith is important, because without it, it is impossible to please God. Now, starting next week, we're going to start to have a little fun with this. We're going to talk about Abel, and we're going to talk about Enoch, just those two tomorrow. And you're going to go, how can you fill 45 minutes with Abel and Enoch? But it's really neat. this deal. We're going to start looking at, we're going to explore all of these, some of these Old Testament men and women, and, you know, talking about Rahab and Sarah, talking about Jephthah and Barak and all of these people, and it's really interesting. I think it is. If y'all don't, you're going to be bored for the next several weeks, but I think we'll have a good time. Thank you all very much.